How did you get to New York City?
I came here for my MFA, which I got in sculpture at Hunter. It's an awesome program. I loved the faculty. I'm just finishing it now. I moved out of the studio like 2 weeks ago, which is very sad. We have like these beautiful studios in Tribeca, so I got to have this sort of glamorous start to my time in New York as an artist, and now I have to get really scrappy to keep it going. Yeah.
Did you always want to be here?
When I was younger and like in high school, I totally imagined myself being here. Then I went to college. I went to Smith in Northampton, Massachusetts. And over the course of being there, I started to like hear from other like alums how difficult it was to be in New York. And I started to hear a lot about kind of a developing art scene in New Orleans. And I realized that I wasn't ready to be launched into a really financially stressful situation with my artwork. Or like as an artist. So I decided to move to New Orleans so that I would have like the time and space to like really like ruminate and experiment and as an artist. And that ended up really being what happened there. As I said earlier, I worked an office job as a grant writer for the first like year and a half, 2 years that I was there. And I really didn't enjoy it. And then I left because my mother was diagnosed with cancer. So I had kind of had this revelation about how I would only have like one chance to really like live the life that I wanted. I had a crisis with my own mortality. And I left the office job really just with the intention of taking what I had learned as a grant writer and applying it to my art career. So even though I hadn't really been making that much art, I just set about like with the goal of creating like a really thorough calendar of opportunities and religiously applying to them. And the goal was really at that point to numb myself to rejection because it had become something I was really afraid of. And one of the things that was holding me back from the career I wanted. So I think I applied like in the first few months to like 20 things and I got one, you know, and then it sort of was like snowballed and built, and I had built a really nice like little career for myself in New Orleans. I was included in like institutional exhibitions at different museums. I'd been written about in Art in America. But as those things were opening up, I just kept like running into this wall of like, I'm not like cracking into a greater art scene. And it started to feel really apparent that I needed to go either to New York or to like a top graduate program. And I was very lucky to get to do both with Hunter and on an amazing budget because it is a city school. I love the CUNY system. I think that's one of like the best things that New York has going. So I'm here. I've been working really hard. It's like definitely a struggle. Everything great about New Orleans and that sucks about New Orleans, New York has the inverse of that in my experience. I loved my community there so much. It was really nurturing. All of my best friends are still my friends from New Orleans and that time there. But like, I also felt like it had this sort of culture of anti-intellectualism and a lack of opportunity for me to develop. So I had to leave in order to like really thrive in this kind of art career component of my life, which one can interpret as careerist, but I think when you are an artist, like you do understand that there is sort of like a spiritual wellness component of like being challenged and excited by like the work people are doing around you. In New York, it's sort of like you can really only be here and making work if you're either like truly excellent or like a Nepo baby, of course, or just really wealthy. But that drive to do something really exciting has been something that's energized me throughout my time here. And I've only been here for a little under 3 years. So I'm still new. But yeah, I think it's the most exciting thing about being in New York, for sure.
Tell me about yourself as an artist. I would love to hear if you've always known this is kind of who you are and what you love to do.
Yeah, I feel like my parents almost decided when I was in the womb that I was an artist. So, I mean, there is some like nature versus nurture question. On both sides of my family, seemingly all of the women are artists or like creative intellectuals in some way. My great half aunt is Alice Aycock. She is a pretty famous like architectural sculptor. And my grandmother was a painter on my dad's side. My aunt is a painter on that side too. My mother was a poet, landscaper, visual artist as well. Her sister was an artist / landscape designer. Like a lot of connections to the earth and art on both sides. And I guess that made it a lot less scary to think about being an artist, which I think that a lot of people just get blocked up just on the like imagination side of considering a life in the arts. Yeah, my aunt and uncle are both actors on my dad's side too. So they are like in theater, and I think that watching them was an influence as well. They my uncle, when he graduated from Northwestern, founded Looking Glass Theater Company with his friends in Chicago, which for a while pre-pandemic was basically the number 2 theater in Chicago to Steppenwolf. So seeing him like create the structure in which to have his career was like a great influence for me. And I think especially when I was in New Orleans, I was really heavily involved with the DIY scene. I started like several projects there that were platforms for other artists, such as like, but the biggest one was Lucky Art Fair, which I collaborated with a few friends on as like all like co-directors. But basically I had known this like kind of random guy. I ran into this guy that I like had like made out with like once or twice, like when I was in college and like visiting New Orleans. And he was like, yeah, my friend has this hotel he just bought and he's about to renovate it, but he wants artists to do something with it first. And he kind of like offered it to me to do a project with. So we ended up creating this 2-week-long quote unquote art fair, because we decided to call it an art fair because I had been watching, I think it was the year that oh god, you have to cut this part out because I'm blanking on the name. That the banana duct tape to the wall sold for like some absurd amount of money.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about how literally all of my friends could live off of that money for a year. And like we could all make our artwork just on that like one sale alone for like a whole year. And I was thinking about how wildly unfair that is. So I came up with this structure where we charged like sliding scale admissions at the door because we wanted to encourage people to make really experimental work that like was experiential rather than like a product. So we pulled all of the money from the donations and then prorated distributions based on like whether or not people made sales. So people made sales that were we just asked them to like report them. So then we redistributed like the pot of money from the door donations to all of the artists. So everybody ended up making the same, just trying to like value the labor that goes into like making art, even if it isn't like a commercially viable project. And it brought together, I think we had like almost 30 artists taking over different spaces in the hotel, anywhere from like a bathroom to the bedroom, hallway, stairwell, outdoor areas. It was all like just filled with different installations and projects. We had lots of performance, music. We had an amazing bartender. Her handle is chicken and champagne. She's actually like kind of popped off since then. She made the bar into an installation itself and made custom cocktails like inspired by everybody's rooms in the hotel. So there was this like really amazing blooming community. This was right before the pandemic that I was part of and got to be kind of like to platform in New Orleans at that time. And that's the kind of thing that like would never get to do in New York, or it would take like a much bigger network than the one that I currently have. And it's a project that I kind of miss that. But I think that that's something a lot of artists complain about actually in New York, is that the DIY scene is sort of evaporated, and it's really hard to find yourself as part of a scene like that now because real estate's gotten so expensive. But yeah, I as I said when we were talking before the interview, I'm part of I work at Beverly's now, which is an artist-run bar, and it's nice to be part of a scene that's sort of like that again. I mean, it is a bar, but it's also an exhibition space, and I get to curate like a video art night there and do other programming. So it's just having that access to that real estate in the Lower East Side is like a nice kind of a relief, for I get to express some of this desire to platform other artists and be part of like a community through that space, which is pretty cool.
You talked about your family history and all these different areas of the arts. Did you try out a bunch of stuff growing up and settle on one avenue that really spoke to you personally?
For me, it was always art. It was always making artwork. When I was in middle school, I guess kind of through high school, I was sort of torn between maybe becoming a psychologist or an artist. I was really interested in like therapy, and I didn't immediately come to like a physical talent, like a recognizable talent with art. I mean, I think that the way that people judge art among like middle school students is like, can you draw this thing really realistically? And because I couldn't do that immediately, I like degraded myself as an artist, or it made it harder for me to imagine it. But then like sort of like when I was in high school, I really started to blossom artistically and started having like kind of like my early like more conceptual thoughts about art. And by the time I got to college, I don't think I even took a class in psychology. I was like pretty focused on just being an artist at that point. Though, of course, like I think that the interest in psychology came from just sort of like family dynamics. Yeah.
What kind of art
go into that more?
Really, what kind of art really spoke to you? What kind of stuff were you tinkering with? Were you working on? At
what point?
In college, and then into your journey here and going to grad school.
Right. So I make found object sculpture. I had the really cool experience. Like one of the first like found object sculptures that I encountered was as a teenager. I went to Mass MoCA with my family, and Neri Ward had a pretty large scale exhibition there, and he had made these like, they were like kind of the shapes of snowmen, like 3 balls, but they were made out of this yellow industrial foam that was like in strips and all like braided together. So they were these big knotted foam balls that had mango pits shoved into them. There was something that was like really bodily and immediately felt about that. And then you could like kind of feel the experience of eating the mango and just like the time passing and like the touch of these like found materials. It's not like I decided that I was going to be a found object sculptor then, but that seeing that work stuck with me. And I ended up getting to work with Neri while I was at Hunter. I caught just like the tail end of his time working there. So it was really cool to get to work with like one of my early influences as a sculptor. I started as a painter, which I made a lot of abstract paintings in college. I think a lot of people start as painting and drawing. It's sort of how
it's like
the education process works, is like you learn how to draw, then and like maybe you go into painting and oil painting. There's normally less opportunity to learn like sculpture techniques. I have found at different like educational institutions. And I still don't actually have that many like traditional skills as a sculptor. Like I'm not out there with a hammer and chisel, like carving stone or even doing that much casting or metal smithing or welding. I've kind of developed my own language and way of building things that it feels like very unique to me. Using things like wire wrapping, like the way that you see wire wrap jewelry as a way to bound materials together, or wax plaster bandages, fabric dipped in like polyurethane wood finish. Like that's the kind of thing that I'm using to actually like build the sculptures that I make, which are relatively large scale creatures, vehicles, environments made out of found materials. They all like are kind of, I'm building a world which I imagine is sort of like a post-human future in which our bodies have sort of like become more like growths upon waste left behind. There's sort of like this like tissue that binds the materials. And I'm thinking about kind of like a world in which the 1% has like jetted off to Mars and all of us are left with this sort of like unsexy, I describe it as an unsexy singularity, where I'm imagining microplastics becoming like macroplastics. So like an old phone receiver has just become like a growth in your back or something like that. And that these so like kind of there's a science fiction component where I'm responding to like the stresses of our time in a really extreme way. But there's also a lot of play, there's a lot of joy. The narrative is there for people who feel they respond to a narrative in a way, but there is also a lot of just like formal exploration. I think a lot about this essay by the anthropologist Tim Ingold called Materials Against Materiality, where he's advocating in the field of material culture studies to not see objects as like fixed, like that, to think about the entire material world is constantly in flux. Like there's never been more or less stuff in the world. It's just always in the state of change. So like as a found object sculptor, I'm kind of seeing myself as a vector in that flux where I find these things that are discarded and then I transform them into something new and greater than themselves, like alone.
For someone who's never heard the phrase a found object sculptor, I'd love for you to describe what the history is or what it is exactly.
The history goes back to the early 1900s. I mean, it could go back further. It probably does. The most famous, what most people consider the first found object sculpture is Duchamp's urinal. But there's some controversy around that. Some other people think it's the Baroness Elsa von, I forget her last name. I'm really bad at remembering artist names. This is like really one of my flaws. But it's basically the urinal came out as this sort of statement that ultimately ended up busting open the whole art world. There's a lot of controversy about how it was originally shown, or not controversy, but controversial opinions about how it was originally shown. But basically at the time there had been these, in Europe there was this salon system. So people would submit to show their artwork in the salon in Paris. And a lot of amazing artwork would be rejected for various reasons because it was sort of chosen by this strict academy of people. There was a famous salon in Paris called Salon de Refuses. I think Duchamp showed some of his early paintings in that exhibition. Then he came to New York and put together basically an exhibition with a group of people where everything that was submitted was accepted. And his contribution was this urinal, which basically, people say that it wasn't that because he did it to challenge this notion of like everything being accepted. Like, will they actually show this? There's people say that it was like on view in a back room, that it wasn't ever accepted, but just the statement of submitting it was like kind of the profound thing enough. The idea is basically that if anything can be an artist, anyone can be an artist. And I guess that's like the root of so much conceptual work, like where art is today. But it is this found object thing that like, I guess I build on that in a way. To me, like the draw of like found object artwork is really about, there are artists that really work with the history of an object. Like Cameron Rowland, for example, is a contemporary artist who writes about, kind of will use relics of, oftentimes like slavery in the United States, and the way that they construct their work is basically to take the object, exhibit it, and then they write really beautifully like essays that are just depicted next, or like displayed next to the object, describing the history of the object. My work used to be a bit more about the objects themselves. Now it's a bit more about building them into something new. Rauschenberg is another major figure who brought found objects into his paintings. This was like 60s, 70s, 80s. That kind of like collage, assemblage technique is something that I am in line with in a way. It's a long history. People do it in many different ways, as I'm trying to describe, perhaps not so clearly. I think Jesse Reeves is an artist I love right now, who's using found objects, building them into furniture, or like use it within the like this like discourse of furniture design. I guess I'm not explaining myself so clearly at this moment.
What about it speaks to you? Why is this the specific kind of art that you feel like resonates with you, that you've dedicated so much of your life to pursuing?
I think that the moment where it became very important for me to work with found objects was also around when my mother died or was diagnosed with cancer, like right before she died, because it was like an archive. Initially, I was working mostly with the archive of like things she had left behind. There was this like need to preserve them, and there's this illusion around art that it is like this like permanent object that like maybe once you're accepted into like a museum collection or something like that, or the artwork is bought, it's almost essentially like put in a refrigerator, a really expensive refrigerator where it can never age or disappear. And like I loved the idea of that. So I did a lot of work with resin to preserve objects that belonged to my mother. One of my most like significant like early pieces was this piece called My Mother's Last Garden, which in which I took all of these flowers that were given to her between her terminal cancer diagnosis and her death, and like individually coated them in resin and planted them in individual squares of cement and displayed them in a large grid. So it was sort of like, to me, it spoke to this like the way in which grief is this universal and varied experience, that that it's something we kind of like all deal with on our own in our own way, like but is also something that everybody has to deal with at some point. So that's sort of what I was trying to get at through this, like the isolating the stems and displaying them in a grid. And it was also about artificially preserving these already dead flowers. So there was like sort of this act of desperation in it. I think I still included like some of my mother's belongings in these sculptures, but I'm a little bit less interested in like making like a really didactic work. I want the work to be open enough to interpretation that people can like look at it and come up with their own sort of like journey through the piece. I want the journey to be like long and layered instead of just like, okay, I get it now. I think as soon as you understand a piece, it dies. That's a quote from, I can't remember who. But I really believe that. I think that it has to be a bit more of a maze, and that's what I'm trying to create with the sculptures now. But yeah, there's an environmental component that like 90% of like what I use is reused. There's almost like a research component to the way that I collect objects now, and that like I developed this deeper understanding of my environment through the objects I collect, because I don't really go out of my way I don't like go to a dump to get stuff. I just am like on my day-to-day commutes, I'm like always looking out for objects. So one anecdote I share a lot that people seem to enjoy is like there's a lot of green buzz balls in my recent sculptures because I would pass by this intersection of like Church Street and Canal Street almost every day on my way to the studio, and I would find green buzz balls replenished there empty every morning. So I kind of like developed a symbiotic relationship with some random person, maybe multiple people, who would get together and drink green buzz balls almost every night on that corner after work. To a point that I noticed that they stopped appearing like around Lent. So I think they must have stopped drinking for Lent. Like, and that because they reappeared like in like April or May. Anyways, so there's like an attunement of finding myself like symbiotically connected with other people in this way that they don't even know about, that I find really exciting about my relationship with found objects now. It's almost like a mapping project. I'm researching elsewhere, but I'm also researching my own interests. There's some autobiographical component to it, and that I can like place when and where I found different objects. And it's not like I collect every single thing that I see. There's like almost no, like, for example, there's like no cardboard in the work because it's just not exciting to me. If I was just collecting whatever, there'd be a fuck ton of cardboard because it's everywhere, and styrofoam. But there's like a color and form and shape and utilitarian reasons I collect all sorts of different things. Like if somebody drops a hair clip, I'm going to take that hair clip because I know I can use it as a way to like bind materials together or adorn a sculpture. And a lot of it's about like embellishment and adornment to create the sort of like density of detail that kind of keeps somebody like holds attention. I think one of the things that's most important about the work right now is that I see myself as an artist as like central in this like battle for attention that we're all dealing with because of our phones. I think phones are actually, there's so many horrific crises in the world right now, but I think the worst is actually like our relationship to our phones, because it anesthetizes people. It makes you not care. Even if you're seeing more violence and information about these various crises because you have this like news source in your pocket all the time, there's something that just breaks people's like motivation to do anything about it with the phone, because your attention is just immediately taken over by an influencer trying to sell you some like weight loss supplement within like 30 seconds and you forget. So basically, in making works that are like really dense sculptures, materially dense, detail dense, I'm trying to actually give people space and time to explore something really physical and delightful, that breaks their kind of pre-routed relationship to the physical world, if that makes sense. I want to capture attention in this way that gives people like a real departure from their regular lives and makes people forget about taking their phone out every 30 seconds. Like, just like give people a reason to stay in the present.
How did you know this specific kind of art was for you? Did you just have an enjoyment that you didn't in other forms of art that made you know this is what you do? I have to imagine this is a relatively niche world. How did you know this was the art form for you?
I guess at some point in high school, I started to get really attached to objects. I'm not like a hoarder per se. But I suppose I'm a really nostalgic person. So there's this need to preserve these things. There's that component that's like intuited. There's just like a love of the material world and this like attunement I have to, like, for example, like I'm a mushroom forager as well. And that requires me to like scan the forest floors whenever I'm out in nature. And I think that my relation...
be very present, I would imagine.
And be very present in this really specific and focused way. And in a way, the collecting found objects throughout the city is really similar to that. It's a really meditative experience. I'm seeing a whole world that whoever I'm walking around with doesn't normally see. It's just like trash that kind of blurs into the background.
What's the inverse of what everyone is focusing on? Because people are either have earphones in or they're looking at their phones.
Totally. Or they're just like looking up at the buildings in the sky and I'm looking down, scanning the floor. I love all sorts of forms of artwork. I still paint from time to time, but I'm not really drawn to it so much. I tried to kind of get myself back into it during grad school because I was really worried about money, and I could see that one of the ways that artists make money is just making abstract paintings, but most of the time people really want to be doing that when they're doing that, and I just don't really want to be doing it right now. I fear, and for some reason in my mind, I will one day retire as an abstract painter, but for some reason right now I need my life to be more difficult and challenging, and I need the work I make to be more difficult and challenging, so I'm not that. I also used to make kind of more like concept driven projects, but as I said earlier, I don't feel like that kind of like literal conceptual work is exciting to me anymore. It used to be like that. I was like always striving to like make the most like direct and pared down statement, whatever I was like trying to say. I wanted it to be like very clear and tightly metaphoric, but I'm more interested in these sort of like open things, which to me is sort of in between the painting and the conceptual projects, because it's like painting you're normally opening up meaning and you're creating a kind of more formal experience where people are left to sort of just journey through the work in their own way. But with a conceptual project, it can be a little bit more prescriptive. So I'm sort of like in between. I'm working in this way and with these materials that people are used to trying to decode, but I'm trying to make it also this like sort of journey where things are more open and you're enjoying like the formal aspects of the work where it feels sort of open. And I'm in a way, I find my sculptures to be primarily pretty beautiful, but it's a challenging type of beauty that not everybody is going to see or understand in a way. But I have had a lot of like very gratifying conversations where I hear about people sort of looking at the material world around them differently after they see my sculptures, and sort of delighting in trash and sort of things like that after looking at my work, which makes me really happy.
We talked offline a little bit about how artists are surviving or trying to survive here in New York, and I'd love to give a little time to have you give any pieces of knowledge or hacks or networks or whatever that has helped make it sounds like 3 years roughly you've been in New York more palatable financially. What has helped there? What's important information for people to have? Well,
I think I mentioned this earlier that I'm very grateful for Hunter. I think if anybody's listening who wants to get an MFA but hasn't gotten one, I really recommend applying to Hunter because it's a top program, but it's only $3,000 or $4,000 a semester. So I came here, I got a little bit of student loans on top of that tuition, and I was able to sort of live primarily off of the loans for a lot of the time, which wasn't very much money, but and I can't really recommend going into debt. But I think not going really wildly into debt for your MFA is super important. A lot of these like schools like Columbia and Yale and NYU are kind of abusive. It's abusive of their student body to charge as much as they do for an MFA. There's like nothing these places can guarantee you after you graduate. So it's just, I don't know, if you can get into Hunter, you should go. After that, I think not rushing into anything. I think I have a Midas touch when it comes to real estate deals. So I do kind of believe that's one of the few areas where I'm just like, just wait and you will manifest the right deal for you. But I do believe in always asking for help, always being, it's like when you're trying to like make a threesome happen and you're like, hey, well, what would be really funny is if we had a threesome, but basically you have to plant the idea, make sure everybody knows exactly what you need and exactly what you want in the most strategic way possible. And it will eventually come to fruition. So like when I was looking for a studio, which I just found one yesterday and I'm about to sign the lease for it. I was basically just telling everybody I knew that I like needed a big studio for an amount of money that would, that I could afford. And and eventually I didn't even have to wait that long. It just like fell into my lap. So there's that. You have to like really rely on your network here. I'm a bartender, as I said earlier. That's helped me a lot in terms of networking. I've met a lot of my people that came to my thesis show and have since given me exhibitions, or people that I met through the bar or through somebody I met at the bar. So that's opened up this whole other like group of people that I'm exposed to regularly. That's really helped me thus far. I got the advice earlier on in my MFA from Jesse Reeves, a sculptor I mentioned earlier, who I really love, to say yes to everything in the beginning. And that's what I've been doing. I've been in, I think, like 7 or 8 shows since my thesis show, which was in March. And then I have like 5 more between now and October. I'm very tired. I'm very exhausted. But each thing, like opportunity, seems to unfold the next. So it's important to be willing, be game, contribute with each exhibition, make sure you're inviting people. Don't expect everybody you're working with to do all of that legwork for you. be easy to work with. Being easy to work with is more than half the battle. If you're a diva in a group exhibition, you're not going to get the solo exhibition. I don't know. That's the kind of, these are, I'm regurgitating a lot of advice. For younger artists, I also like, I want to stress how important these like DIY projects are. Like that's how you build your network of people that will inspire you. It's like you will connect with other artists. You will have this like collective experience. You'll create opportunities for others that will unfold into opportunities for yourself. If you can't do DIY projects here, I think, or if you are not able to be an artist in New York, I really think you should leave for a little while and then come back. Like I can't stress how important it was for me conceiving my own identity as an artist, as like living in New Orleans. Like there's no doubt in my mind that is my absolute top priority, is to just be an artist. And I don't know if I would have that if I had come here when I like right off the bat when I was so young, like right out of college. I'm worried that I would just be sort of like lost otherwise. But those years, just like feeling what it's like to like have art be my primary thing in New Orleans were really formative for me. Yeah, I guess like just, I think it's about if you can make your day job work for your art career in any way, whether or not it's helping your network or it's giving you a skill, like you're working for an artist and you're learning how to do something like weld, or you're learning how to like apply for grants. You always want your day job to be helping your real job or your real vocation. So I definitely recommend like if you're trying to figure out what you should be doing for your day job, sit down and write a list of what's actually going to help you achieve the goals that you have for yourself in the long term. And if you can, don't do anything else, like other than like focusing on like some things that will actually help your career and your long-term goals. Or get a job where you're making a lot of money in a short amount of time. In New Orleans, I was a pedicab driver, so I would make actually like an absurd amount of money doing that a lot of the time. And I only had to work like 1 or 2 days a week in order to make enough to live off of.
Wow.
That was an awesome thing. I don't have anything like that here yet, but it will come. Yeah.
Maybe we can close with this, because I know there's a common trope in the world and in the culture about there being starving artists, basically, and you've alluded to the difficulties. Has it been worth it? I know you're just kind of starting out, but I'd love to hear, we talked about this a little offline, any thoughts you have about why you keep doing this, or if you feel like it is worth the struggles.
Well, my primary focus has been on art for a long time. I feel like I'm new again after I graduated, finished grad school, because I did reinvent. I'm in a process of reinventing myself recently. But I've said this a few times this week, actually, just that it's a difficult life, but it's a deeply fulfilling one. There are a lot of challenges. I've been on food stamps before. That will definitely help you not starve. Definitely apply for food stamps. It's a challenging life, but it's an extremely rewarding one, because you have, especially if you are a really social artist and you're in a great community of artists, because you are really, you're meeting people and having these rarefied experiences that no one else gets to have. And I have that almost every time I go to my studio. I just get to revel in creating something that no one else has done before. It's also like, it's not just about the making or like the going to like these like amazing parties and stuff like that and having these amazing conversations. It's also just like an extremely fulfilling way of seeing the world. Like as I talked about earlier, like walking around, it's not just that I'm seeing like these objects all the time. I'm constantly being inspired by things that other people would find mundane or would be almost invisible to them. So there's this like delight and joy that I take from like the world around me that is totally core to my experience of being an artist. And I couldn't exchange that for any amount of money. It would not be worth it to me. So yeah, I guess that's, I think that if you feel the desire to be an artist, it's not worth it to wait. You should just do it right now. When I quit my grant writing job, I don't know. Did I say this already?
I don't think so.
I decided to just apply everything I had learned in that job, the whole grant writing structure, skills, calendar that I had made to my own career as an artist, and just numb myself to rejection, because my fear of rejection was the main thing holding me back at that point. And I applied to something like 20, I think I had applied to 19 opportunities by the time I was accepted for like the first one. And that sort of numbing myself to rejection is almost like my superpower as an artist, because when I don't get something, I just don't really care. I just think, okay, well, I'll apply again next time and hopefully I'll get it. Of course, there's sometimes like some resentment and some hurt feelings mostly if I feel like I had something in the bag and I don't get it, that's when I get upset. But there's the rejection, you just have to like see the bigger picture of like who you are and what you want out of life. And then the rejection like just sort of stops mattering once you realize, like, once you really like start to like believe in and love like who you are and who you are aspiring to be. I feel like I sound like naively young saying that for some reason, but yeah.
Rosalie, thank you.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. This was a really nice conversation.